Welcome to True Crime Threads. Today we uncover the chilling story of a wife who poisoned her husband for money. Mara and Daniel Turner seemed like a picture-perfect couple. They had been married for 10 years, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood with 2 young children and a home that most people would envy. On the outside, everything appeared ideal. They were the couple who attended family barbecues, volunteered at school events, and shared a bond that others admired. Yet, behind closed doors, the marriage was far from perfect. Mara, a striking woman with an air of mystery, had always enjoyed the attention she received from men, but after years of marriage, the thrill had begun to fade. Daniel, on the other hand, was dependable and loving, a man who had committed himself to his family. He worked long hours as an accountant and always came home with a smile, ready to spend time with his kids and wife. He was content, assuming that everything in their marriage was just as it seemed. But Mara's desires had grown beyond what Daniel could offer. She had started an affair with her boss, Charles, a wealthy and charming man who was the polar opposite of Daniel. Charles was a risk-taker, an exciting figure who provided Mara with the thrill and luxury that had long been absent from her life. His presence made her feel alive in ways Daniel no longer could. The affair escalated quickly. While Daniel worked hard to provide for his family, Mara and Charles indulged in a secret life. They spent weekends together, staying in lavish hotels and dining at upscale restaurants. Charles showered Mara with expensive gifts, things Daniel could never afford. It wasn't just the material things, though. Mara felt an intense emotional connection with Charles that she hadn't experienced in years, and she found herself growing more distant from Daniel. However, the affair was not without its complications. Mara found herself caught between the man she had once loved and the excitement that Charles provided. Daniel was a kind man, blind to the betrayal happening under his nose. He had no idea that Mara was growing resentful of their life together, but even worse, he had no clue that she was planning her escape. Mara's mounting financial problems added another layer to the equation. She had accrued significant debt, all from maintaining the lifestyle she had come to crave. In a desperate bid for freedom, she realized the solution lay in one place: Daniel's life insurance policy. With a payout of $100,000, it would provide her the means to start fresh and be with Charles. But to make this plan work, she would need Daniel out of the picture, and she would need to do it in a way that wouldn't raise suspicion. The plan was set in motion, and Mara's mind began to race as she thought of the perfect way to make her husband's death look like an accident. Mara began to carefully devise her plan, knowing that timing and subtlety were key to making it all work. Daniel was predictable in many ways. He had a set routine that he followed every day, and this made him an easy target. He worked long hours at his office and was generally home by 6 p.m., just in time for dinner. His love for pizza, especially the pepperoni variety, was well known in the family. He had always enjoyed the comfort of a simple meal after a hard day's work. Mara knew that this seemingly harmless dinner would be the perfect way to execute her plan. She began to research ways to poison Daniel without raising suspicion. After several days of searching, she stumbled upon a deadly substance called resin. It was a potent toxin, capable of causing death in a matter of hours when ingested. The best part: it was tasteless and odorless, making it the ideal choice for Mara's scheme. She learned that it could be extracted from castor beans and used in tiny amounts to cause severe poisoning. It would be nearly impossible to trace if used correctly, and it could easily be hidden in food. Mara, determined to carry out her plan, ordered the resin online, knowing that it would be difficult for authorities to trace it back to her. When the package arrived, she was careful to hide it away, keeping it out of sight from both her children and Daniel. She studied how to prepare it carefully, making sure she knew exactly how much to use to ensure the job was done without detection. Her nerves were steady, her resolve strong. There was no turning back now. With everything in place, Mara waited for the perfect evening to put her plan into action. The evening arrived, and Mara pretended to be the loving wife she had once been. She asked Daniel what he wanted for dinner, knowing full well his answer would be pizza. As usual, he was eager to enjoy a meal with his family and unwittingly played right into Mara's hands. She made the pizza from scratch, carefully adding the raisin to the pizza sauce. It was a delicate balance, just the right amount to ensure a fatal dose, but not so much that it would be detectable. Once the pizza was ready, she baked it to perfection and placed it on the table, making sure it looked exactly like any other meal they had enjoyed in the past. When Daniel sat down at the table, he was oblivious to the deadly meal in front of him. He took a slice, smiling at Mara and complimenting her on how delicious it smelled. She watched with a mix of anxiety and anticipation, knowing that it wouldn't be long before her husband would fall into her trap. The evening unfolded as Mara had hoped. Daniel, completely unaware of the danger, devoured his slice of pizza with enthusiasm. He had always looked forward to family dinners, and tonight was no different. Mara sat across from him, watching him eat, her heart pounding in her chest. She kept up a calm exterior, offering him more slices as he finished his first, trying to maintain the appearance of a loving wife. But inside she was on edge, knowing that with each bite Daniel took, her plan was inching closer to completion. As the night wore on, Daniel seemed content, chatting about his day and laughing at the children's antics. Mara felt a strange mixture of guilt and excitement. She had been planning this moment for weeks, but now that it was happening, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Still, there was no turning back. The money was essential for her future with Charles. If she could pull this off, she would finally be free of the life she had grown tired of, and everything would fall into place. About an hour after dinner, Mara began to notice the first signs of distress in Daniel. He had started to feel nauseous, complaining of a slight stomach ache. At first, Mara didn't show any sign of concern. After all, it was common for someone to feel ill after eating too much. She suggested that he lie down, trying to appear caring while inwardly she was calm. This was all going according to plan. As time passed, however, Daniel's symptoms worsened. He became pale, his breathing shallow, and he started to sweat profusely. His stomach pain seemed to intensify, and his face contorted in agony. His confusion grew as he struggled to stay upright. Mara's expression remained neutral, but inside, panic began to creep in. The ricin was working faster than she had anticipated, and Daniel was starting to look dangerously ill. Mara continued to play the role of the concerned wife, urging Daniel to drink water and rest. She told him she would call for help, though her words lacked urgency. In reality, she wasn't worried about saving him. She knew the poison was already doing its work, and by the time the paramedics arrived, it would be too late. She watched, her heart racing, as Daniel's condition deteriorated rapidly. Within another hour, Daniel was unresponsive. His body had gone limp, and his breathing was irregular. Mara called 911, though she didn't sound as frantic as she should have. When the paramedics arrived, they attempted to resuscitate him, but Daniel was already beyond saving. They pronounced him dead on the scene, the cause of death attributed to food poisoning. The family, unaware of the true cause, was left devastated. Mara pretended to mourn her husband's death, hiding her relief behind tears and sorrow. What should have been a tragedy was, for her, the beginning of a new life. At first, Daniel's death was treated as a tragic accident. The doctors and paramedics attributed his sudden demise to food poisoning, a diagnosis that seemed plausible given the symptoms. Mara was devastated, but she quickly slipped into the role of a grieving widow. She called family and friends, organizing the funeral and accepting condolences, all while maintaining the facade of a heartbroken wife. She had done her part perfectly, and now it seemed that no one suspected a thing. Her life insurance payout was almost within reach, and everything was falling into place. However, something about the case didn't sit right with the investigators. The autopsy report revealed that Daniel's symptoms were far more severe than typical food poisoning, leading the medical examiner to request a deeper investigation. They found traces of an unusual substance in Daniel's system, ricin. This discovery sent alarm bells ringing through the department. The investigators began to dig deeper, questioning the details surrounding Daniel's sudden and violent illness. Mara's calm reaction to her husband's death raised further suspicion. While she had been careful to act like a grieving wife, there were small inconsistencies in her story. She seemed more composed than most people in her situation, and her nonchalant behavior during the investigation caught the attention of the detectives. The police began to scrutinize every detail of Mara's life, including her financial records and recent activities. As they dug further, they found that Mara had recently taken out a large life insurance policy on Daniel. The payout was substantial $100,000, a sum that would have been more than enough to free her from her debts and begin a new life with her lover, Charles. This was a clear motive, and it raised even more questions about Mara's involvement in her husband's death. The investigation continued, and the detectives found a series of troubling connections. They learned that Mara and Charles had been having an affair for months, a fact that Mara had tried to conceal. The affair had become public just days before Daniel's death, and it was clear that Mara's relationship with her husband had been deteriorating long before that. As the investigators pieced together the evidence, they began to suspect that Daniel's death was no accident, but rather a calculated murder. The turning point came when detectives discovered a significant piece of evidence: a phone call made to Charles the night Daniel died. The call was brief but telling. Charles was questioned and eventually confessed to helping Mara, albeit unknowingly. He had provided her with information on the best way to poison Daniel, unaware of the deadly consequences. This revelation shook the case wide open. Mara's carefully crafted plan had unraveled, and the detectives were now certain that she had murdered her husband for financial gain. As the investigation gained momentum, more startling details began to emerge, unraveling the carefully constructed life Mara had built. The detectives were relentless, digging into her past, her relationships, and her financial records. They uncovered more than just the affair with Charles. They found evidence of her deep resentment toward Daniel and the lengths she was willing to go to escape her life. The life insurance policy, which had seemed like the perfect opportunity to start fresh, became a glaring red flag. The breakthrough in the case came when Charles, initially unaware of Mara's true intentions, became more involved in the investigation. At first, he had tried to maintain his distance, but the mounting evidence forced him to confront the truth. In a series of interviews, he eventually admitted that he had provided Mara with the knowledge she needed to carry out the poisoning. Charles was a businessman, not a criminal, but his involvement had made him a key piece in the puzzle. The police were now certain that Mara had orchestrated the entire scheme. She had used her charm to manipulate Charles into giving her the means to poison her husband, all the while pretending to be a devoted wife. Her cold calculation was evident. She had planned every detail, from the purchase of the raisin to the subtle poisoning in the pizza sauce. Daniel had trusted her completely, never suspecting that his wife was planning his death for a payout that would change her life forever. When Mara was arrested, the case shocked the community. Her image as the perfect wife had crumbled, and the truth about her greed and manipulation came to light. During her trial, it became clear that she had carefully planned Daniel's murder, choosing the moment when he would be most vulnerable. The toxic raisin had worked swiftly, and Daniel had no chance to survive. The medical examiner confirmed that the poison had caused his body to shut down within hours, and there was no possibility of saving him once the symptoms began. Mara was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Her affair with Charles, once a secret affair of passion, had now become a significant part of the case. Charles, while not a direct accomplice, was charged with accessory to murder for his role in supplying the information that led to Daniel's death. His punishment was much lighter, but the realization that he had unknowingly aided in a murder haunted him. Mara's plan had backfired. Instead of a new life with Charles and a financial windfall, she found herself locked away behind bars, her future ruined by her own greed. The chilling story of how a wife poisoned her husband for money serves as a stark reminder of the lengths people will go to for wealth, and the dark consequences that can follow when love is replaced by manipulation.